Tariffs and supply chains, what's true and what's not. Examining the claim, tariffs kill jobs, and how tariffs have created jobs in some U.S. industries. Introduction. The debate over tariffs and their impact on the U.S. economy is a contentious one, often mired in competing narratives. On one hand, tariffs are touted as a tool to protect domestic industries, boost job creation, and reduce reliance on foreign imports. On the other, critics argue that tariffs disrupt global supply chains, increase costs, and ultimately lead to job losses, encapsulated in the phrase, "tariffs kill jobs." This article seeks to unpack these claims, focusing on the complex interplay between tariffs, supply chains, and employment in U.S. industries. By examining recent studies, economic data, and real-world examples, we aim to clarify what's true and what's not, with a particular focus on instances where tariffs have demonstrably created jobs in specific U.S. sectors. This comprehensive analysis will explore the theoretical foundations of tariffs, their historical and contemporary impacts on supply chains, the evidence behind job creation and losses, and the broader economic implications. We'll also address common misconceptions, drawing on empirical research and industry case studies to provide a balanced perspective. The goal is to offer a nuanced understanding of how tariffs function in a globalized economy and whether the claim that tariffs kill jobs holds up under scrutiny. Understanding tariffs and supply chains. What are tariffs? Tariffs are taxes imposed by governments on imported goods and services, typically designed to achieve one or more of the following objectives. Protect domestic industries. By making imported goods more expensive, tariffs can give domestic producers a competitive edge. Generate revenue. Tariffs provide governments with a source of income, historically a significant driver of trade policy. Influence trade dynamics. Tariffs can be used to negotiate trade agreements or retaliate against perceived unfair trade practices. In the U.S., tariffs have been a tool of economic policy since the nation's founding, with notable examples like the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, which exacerbated the Great Depression, and more recent tariffs under the Trump administration targeting countries like China, Canada, and Mexico. The role of supply chains in the global economy. Modern supply chains are intricate networks spanning multiple countries, involving raw material extraction, component manufacturing, assembly, and distribution. Globalization has enabled companies to optimize costs by sourcing materials and labor from regions with comparative advantages. For example, a smartphone might have components designed in the US, manufactured in China, and assembled in Vietnam before being shipped globally. Tariffs disrupt these networks by increasing the cost of imported goods, prompting companies to re-evaluate sourcing strategies. This can lead to supply chain reshoring, moving production back to the US, nearshoring, relocating to nearby countries like Mexico, or diversification to avoid tariff regions. However, these adjustments are costly and complex, often taking years to implement fully. The "tariffs kill jobs" narrative. The claim that tariffs kill jobs stems from the idea that higher import costs lead to increased prices, reduced consumer demand, and retaliatory tariffs from other nations, all of which can harm U.S. industries. Critics point to studies showing net job losses in certain sectors, particularly those reliant on imported inputs or exports. For instance, a 2019 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that the 2018 U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods led to higher consumer prices and a net economic loss of $7.2 billion, with minimal job gains in protected industries. However, this narrative doesn't tell the full story. While tariffs can have negative effects, they have also been credited with creating jobs in specific U.S. industries, particularly those targeted for protection. The challenge is to weigh these gains against broader economic costs, including disruptions to supply chains and downstream industries. Tariffs and job creation, evidence from U.S. industries. Historical context, tariffs and U.S. industrialization. Tariffs have historically played a role in fostering U.S. industrial growth. In the 19th century, high tariffs protected nascent industries like steel and textiles, allowing them to compete with established European manufacturers. The McKinley Tariff of 1890, for example, is credited with boosting domestic production in certain sectors, though it also raised consumer prices. This historical precedent suggests that tariffs can create jobs in targeted industries, but their success depends on the economic context and implementation. The Trump Tariffs, 2018 to 2019, a case study. The tariffs imposed during President Donald Trump's first term, 2018 to 2019, provide a recent and well-documented case study. These tariffs targeted a range of goods, including steel, 25%, aluminum, 10%, and various Chinese imports, 10 to 25%. The stated goal was to protect U.S. industries, reduce the trade deficit, and encourage domestic manufacturing. Let's examine specific industries where tariffs led to job creation. Steel and aluminum industries. The Section 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum, implemented in 2018, aimed to bolster domestic production by shielding U.S. producers from cheaper foreign imports. A 2023 report by the U.S. International Trade Commission found that these tariffs reduced steel imports by 24% and increased domestic production by about 2% between 2018 and 2021. This led to measurable job gains in the steel industry. Job creation. The steel tariffs are estimated to have created approximately 1,000 to 2,000 jobs in the U.S. steel industry. For example, U.S. Steel reopened a plant in Granite City, Illinois, in 2018, hiring 800 workers directly as a result of the tariffs. Nucor Corporation also expanded its operations, adding jobs in states like Alabama and Kentucky. Economic impact. The same report noted a $2.8 billion increase in production in protected industries, driven by higher domestic prices and reduced import competition. However, these gains came at a cost. The tariffs increased input costs for steel-consuming industries, such as automotive and construction, leading to an estimated $3.4 billion production decrease in downstream sectors and a net loss of approximately 75,000 manufacturing jobs by mid-2019. This illustrates the trade-off. While tariffs created jobs in targeted sectors, they harmed others reliant on imported materials. Washing machine industry. Another example is the 2018 tariffs on washing machines, which ranged from 20% to 50% on imports from countries like South Korea and Mexico. These tariffs were designed to protect U.S. manufacturers like Whirlpool. A 2019 National Bureau of Economic Research study found that the tariffs led to job creation. Approximately 1,800 jobs were created in the U.S. washing machine industry, as domestic production increased to meet demand previously filled by imports. Price increases. However, the price of washing machines rose by nearly 12%, and dryers, not subject to tariffs, also saw price hikes due to market dynamics, costing consumers an estimated $1.5 billion. This translates to a cost of $815,000 per job created, highlighting the inefficiency of tariffs as a job creation tool in this case. Solar panel industry. Tariffs on solar panels, imposed in 2018 at 30%, aim to revive U.S. manufacturing in the renewable energy sector. While the tariffs led to some domestic investment, such as new manufacturing facilities by companies like First Solar, job creation was modest. A 2025 study by Washington University's Panos Kavelis noted that tariffs on raw materials and components, like silicon and wafers, increased costs for domestic manufacturers, limiting reshoring and job growth. However, specific plants, such as First Solar's facility in Ohio, added several hundred jobs, showing targeted benefits in niche sectors. Recent developments. The 2025 tariffs. In 2025, the Trump administration announced new tariffs, including 20% on Chinese imports, 25% on Canadian and Mexican goods, and 25% on imported vehicles and auto parts. While it's too early to assess their full impact, early indicators suggest mixed outcomes. Automotive industry. Posts on X have claimed that tariffs led to 9,000 new auto jobs in a single month, though this figure lacks detailed sourcing and should be treated as inconclusive. The automotive sector faces challenges due to its reliance on cross-border supply chains, particularly with Canada and Mexico, which supply nearly half of U.S. auto parts. Tariffs could encourage some domestic production, but higher costs may offset job gains. Manufacturing boost. Goldman Sachs estimates that the 2025 tariffs could create around 100,000 manufacturing jobs by incentivizing reshoring. However, the same report projects a net loss of 400,000 to 500,000 jobs across other sectors due to higher input costs and reduced consumer demand, echoing the 2018 to 2019 experience. The other side, how tariffs disrupt supply chains and cost jobs. Supply chain disruptions. Tariffs disrupt global supply chains by increasing the cost of imported goods, forcing companies to adapt. A 2025 CNBC supply chain survey found that high costs are the primary barrier to reshoring manufacturing to the U.S., with 57% of respondents citing cost as the biggest challenge and 21% noting a lack of skilled labor. Instead of returning production to the U.S., many firms shift to lower tariff countries like Mexico or Vietnam, as seen with the 2018 tariffs, which reduced China's share of U.S. imports from 22% in 2017 to 13.8% in 2024. These shifts can lead to increased costs. Tariffs on raw materials like steel and aluminum raise production costs for downstream industries, such as automotive and construction. For example, the 2018 steel tariffs led to higher costs for U.S. automakers, adding up to $3,000 to the price of some vehicles. Supply chain reconfiguration. Companies may diversify suppliers or relocate production, but these adjustments are costly and time-consuming. A 2025 Thomson Reuters report noted that tariffs disrupt just-in-time inventory systems, leading to delays and higher freight costs. Retaliatory tariffs. Other countries often respond with their own tariffs, harming U.S. exporters. A 2022 USDA study estimated that retaliatory tariffs from 2018 to 2019 cost U.S. agricultural exports $27 billion, particularly affecting soybean, cotton, and sorghum farmers. Job losses in downstream industries. The "tariffs kill jobs" claim is supported by evidence of net job losses in industries affected by higher input costs or retaliatory tariffs. Steel-consuming industries. A 2018 analysis by economists Katie Russ and Lydia Cox found that steel-consuming jobs outnumber steel-producing jobs 80-1, meaning tariffs on steel harm far more workers than they help. For example, the 2002 Bush steel tariffs led to an estimated 168,000 job losses in steel-using industries, more than the entire steel sector's employment. Automotive sector. The 2025 tariffs on Canada and Mexico threaten the automotive industry, which relies on integrated North American supply chains. Bloomberg Economics estimates that a 25% tariff on Mexican goods could slash Mexico's GDP by 16%, disrupting U.S. auto production and potentially leading to job losses. Agriculture. Retaliatory tariffs from China in 2018 to 2019 hit U.S. farmers hard, particularly in the Midwest. The New York Times reported that these tariffs had a negative effect on agricultural jobs, despite political support in affected regions. Consumer price increases. Tariffs often lead to higher consumer prices, as importers pass on costs. A 2019 study by Alberto Cavallo found that the 2018 tariffs on Chinese goods were almost fully passed through to U.S. import prices, though some businesses absorbed costs, reducing retail margins. The Tax Foundation estimates that the 2025 tariffs could cost U.S. households an average of $1,300 annually, with lower-income families hit hardest. Higher prices can reduce consumer demand, further impacting jobs in retail and related sectors. Debunking myths and misconceptions. Tariffs always create jobs. While tariffs can create jobs in protected industries, the net effect is often negative due to losses in downstream sectors. For example, the 2018 steel tariffs created jobs in steel production but led to a net loss of 75,000 manufacturing jobs by mid-2019. Claims like those on X suggesting tariffs created 9,000 auto jobs in a month lack robust evidence and oversimplify complex economic dynamics. Tariffs kill all jobs. The "tariffs kill jobs" narrative is also an oversimplification. As shown, tariffs have created jobs in industries like steel, aluminum, and washing machines. The key is specificity. Targeted tariffs on nascent industries or those with high demand elasticity can yield benefits, as noted by Goldman Sachs. However, broad-based tariffs often lead to net job losses due to their ripple effects. Tariffs always reshore manufacturing. Rather than bringing production back to the U.S., tariffs often prompt companies to shift supply chains to other low-cost countries. The CNBC survey found that 61% of companies plan to relocate to lower tariff regimes rather than the U.S., citing high costs and labor shortages. This was evident in the 2018 to 2019 tariffs, which boosted imports from Vietnam and Mexico. Tariffs are a panacea for trade deficits. Tariffs aim to reduce trade deficits by cutting imports, but they often fail to address the root causes of imbalances, such as savings and investment patterns. A 2018 Federal Reserve Bank of New York analysis found that tariffs reduced both imports and exports, leaving the trade deficit largely unchanged. Moreover, boosting exports requires imports in global supply chains, a nuance often overlooked. Broader economic implications. Economic growth and competitiveness. Tariffs can undermine U.S. competitiveness by increasing costs and isolating firms from global markets. The Center for American Progress argues that the 2025 tariffs could reduce job prospects and make it harder for businesses to compete globally, particularly in industries like AI and clean energy. Conversely, strategic tariffs paired with investment in key sectors could enhance competitiveness, but the Trump administration's approach has been criticized as erratic and lacking focus. Inflation and consumer impact. Tariffs contribute to inflation by raising import prices. The Richmond Fed estimates that a 10% tariff increase raises consumer prices by about 0.3%. The 2025 tariffs are projected to increase grocery costs, particularly for produce from Mexico, which supplies over 60% of U.S. vegetable imports. This disproportionately affects lower-income households, exacerbating inequality. Global trade relations. Tariffs strain relationships with trading partners, as seen with retaliatory tariffs from China, Canada, and Mexico. The abandonment of treaty commitments, as noted by University of Chicago experts, undermines decades of diplomatic efforts to build a stable trading system. This could weaken U.S. leverage in future negotiations and reduce access to fast-growing markets. Policy alternatives to tariffs. Rather than relying on tariffs, policymakers could consider investment in innovation, subsidies for R&D in emerging industries like AI, quantum computing, and clean energy could create high-value jobs without disrupting supply chains. Workforce development, addressing the skilled labor shortage, cited as a barrier to reshoring, could make the U.S. more attractive for manufacturing. Tax credits and incentives, targeted tax credits, like those for EV battery production, have spurred investment in North America, though often in Mexico rather than the U.S. Trade agreements, strengthening agreements like the USMCA could reduce reliance on adversarial trading partners while maintaining supply chain efficiency. Conclusion. The debate over tariffs and their impact on jobs and supply chains is far from black and white. While the claim, "tariffs kill jobs," captures real economic costs, higher prices, supply chain disruptions, and net job losses in downstream industries, it overlooks instances where tariffs have created jobs in targeted sectors like steel, aluminum, and washing machines. The 2018 to 2019 tariffs demonstrate this duality, with modest job gains in protected industries offset by broader losses and consumer price increases. The 2025 tariffs are likely to follow a similar pattern, with potential benefits in manufacturing overshadowed by challenges in sectors reliant on global supply chains. What's true is that tariffs are a blunt instrument, effective in specific contexts but costly when applied broadly. What's not true is that they are a universal solution for job creation or trade deficits. Policymakers must weigh these trade-offs carefully, combining tariffs with strategic investments and workforce development to maximize benefits and minimize harm. As global supply chains continue to evolve, adaptability and foresight will be key to ensuring U.S. industries remain competitive without sacrificing economic stability.